What happens when an education leader takes a step back to reflect on the system they've dedicated their life to? Well, today we are speaking with David Ardley, a trailblazer in international education, now taking a career break to reimagine what education could be. David has held transformative roles in education, including his leadership as the founding principal of Beach School Rydia. With decades of experience across the UK, France, Switzerland, and Saudi Arabia, he has been at the forefront of inclusive and innovative education. Now, during a pivotal career break, he's rethinking what's next for educators and learners alike. David, stepping away from a career to reflect is a bold move. Can you share what inspired you to take this career break and what you've been focusing on during this time?
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for that very kind introduction there. Far too kind, if I'm honest with you. It was I was in Switzerland a few years ago in a senior leadership role, enjoying things, and I got a phone call about an opportunity to come to Saudi Arabia to be a founding principal at a new school. It's one of those things. Spoke with my family. Let's do this, and I went and took on the role. It was a brilliant opportunity. We'll talk later about what led to that actually in our discussion. So I had a contract, worked through, and I think the key thing for me in this, it was challenging, it was exciting. I absolutely loved it. But there's a certain time when you get into these positions where part of the skill of what you do is knowing when to step away or when to let go and let a move happen or a transition happen for whatever that may be. Chatsworth Schools was set up. The school in partnership over there had a brilliant vision on inclusion and inclusive education. And we'll talk about this. And that's what I brought into the whole concept of the way they were doing it. We talk about inclusive education, but they were doing it. So I did 12, 15 months, I can't remember now. And then it was just time to step away. There was also some personal circumstance. My wife's parents, sadly, but in a good way, passed on. They were way into their 90s, so they had an excellent innings. And it just all tied in quite well for me to take, after 37 years of being in a profession, to just take a step back. So that all came to a conclusion, amicably left from the school, and I stepped back and stayed in Riyadh, did some work and some consultancy work, visited back to family in France and so on. And I think one of the things you said here was, what I've been focusing on. I've been doing a lot of reading. A lot of reading on LinkedIn, dare I say it. I mean, books I love. LinkedIn has been a real good source. I've been playing Fortnite. It's my release. Don't judge me. Tinkering with cars and, just doing some things. I collect toy cars as well. Another sad thing to tick on the box. Just catching up with things, really. You know, it was a nice breather. That's where it was. And now I'm kind of champing at the bit to go again. But I've kept my hand in bits of, I call it consultancy, but advising and helping people along the way. And also just absorbing what's going on in Saudi at the moment with the development of schools and education, from really foundational kind of flagstones right through to the kind of all the international schooling that's going on there. So yeah, it's been a really refreshing break.
Yeah, it sounds. I remember I was listening to Ali Abdaal once talk about retirement. And he kind of looked at it in terms of like the different types of retirements that you have. And one of those isn't like a traditional one in the sense of you get to that age and you stop working full stop. It's actually talking about like almost like you say career breaks within careers, like a mini retirement to go off and do something, a sabbatical to some sense, and then come back into work. So it sounds for all intents and purposes that you're having a wonderful time, as it were, and feel refreshed and reinvigorated and ready to continue contributing to education.
Yeah, I am, Alex. And I think you hit a point there. This wasn't planned at all. And throughout my career, I've never planned like a trajectory or think there's certain schools you wanted to have on your radar or certain roles you wanted to have within schools that you aspire to, be it a head of department or, a house parent, a pastoral role or whatever it might be. But things like this happened, you look at the situation, you take it, and then you go again. And I've always been that way. I think if you get caught up too much in trying to have almost micromanaging your own career or your professional development to a certain extent, you miss the opportunities that come to you blindside. And you also, perhaps because you have such a focus, and there's nothing wrong with focus, but it's so intense that you miss those opportunities which you actually have to go to the side to grab. And so that's where I kind of, am with it. So, it's been very positive, if I'm honest with you. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, in that sort of period of reflection, and we talk about your career, are there anything say, parts or times within it, something that you're most proud of in terms of the impact you've made on students or on educators?
This is one of the questions that I took a long time to think about. The two things, I think, Alex, for me, from a student hit, one of the things I'm very proud of, because I'm a design and technology teacher by trade through my own 4-year BEd degree in design and technology for secondary, and then where I've got my design education and the nuances associated with that. I think it's getting kids, students, and adults to think differently in what they do within schools. And that, I know it's been a buzz thing now about, creative thinking or design thinking in schools. Back in the 70s, we had this on kind of syllabus guidance and things. It's not new, but like anything in education, apart from digital technologies, we tend to revisit stuff which has already been in place, and we just put a slightly different twist on it, or we forget about it and we suddenly flag it up again. Go, oh yeah, that was a really good idea. So getting students and staff to think differently in terms of what they're doing, I think that for me has been one of the kind of the threads of continuum throughout what I've done in my career. I haven't changed who I am in terms of my mindset on that. I've learned many things along the way, again, as we'll talk a little bit later about the ways I mismanaged that perception of what I wanted people to do and think the way I did, because there is disconnect because of where you come from, your background, your areas of study, or where you live, your culture, there are differences. And understanding that is quite a big remit of this. But just getting students, whether it be sport, academic or creative, how to approach things differently. Everyone gives a massive buzz when they see a sports person, especially in a team situation, be it rugby or football, do something a bit different, that backflip or the behind the head pass, whatever it might be. No one goes, oh, isn't that brilliant? Well, it is, but it's thinking differently to do that. And it's a spontaneous thing. And I'm not sure how we get that into what we do, but I think I believe I've done quite well in getting students to think that way and think differently to the way they do things. And the same with colleagues, when I've led colleagues in departments and faculties, just getting them to challenge their perceptions already, to go ahead with the perception still, but also maybe to bring a bit of change to it. And that's refreshing. Even if we come back to where we were, at least we've had the discussion and thought about it. And I think that's what I'm most proud of so far.
It's been a great accomplishment and achievement. And you mentioned in there this concept of change. And we don't really use the word change, I think, in education anymore. We use the word innovation, don't we? It seems to kind of just, as I'm about to say, we've changed how we use the word. But years ago, it wasn't there. But it's something that you are obviously quite passionate about. And I think, as you say, from a design technology and just changing how we think about things. Is there anything that you would say from your own leadership experience and taking those things on board that are really relevant for today's education leaders?
Good question. I did a talk not so long ago on this about innovation in schools, and it made me, the fact that I did that made me think a lot about this and write down some things. I think in schools, it's important to understand the difference between kind of innovation and legislation. So if there's a national government change on curriculum provision at whatever level, then schools have to adapt because you've got to deliver that aspect if you're tied to it. As much as innovation can be something as mundane as my security guard or our security guards coming and saying, look, we've been watching the cars coming in the mornings. It's a massive hold up. If we change that and they come in here and go through there, we'll completely reduce the problems that we've got here, and it's safer for the kids getting out of the cars to come into school. Wow, that's an innovative way of doing this. And that, I think, is the key to innovation in schools. It may not, you can't really plan for, you can plan for innovation, but a lot of the good innovation comes as a consequence of something that you look at and you're evaluating because of, it could be safeguarding and well-being. It could just be practicalities. We've got too many kids. We've only got one classroom. How can we deal with this? That type of thing. So innovation and innovation curriculum, I think, is something that is missing in schools currently. Innovation in terms of the things which the tools and support that we have in schools, I think is pretty good. And we'll discuss this a little bit later on, but there is a slight disconnect there, I think, because we're caught in the traditions and heritage of what we do in schools. But innovation often slaps you on the face when you least expect it.
Yeah, and often or not, it's one of those, like you mentioned, it's a needed rather than a planned for type of thing that often happens with it. Yeah. And those things, I imagine, can also be quite challenging when it just kind of rears its head unexpectedly. Thinking back over your career then, what have been some of the toughest challenges you faced as a school leader? And how have those experiences helped to shape your view on education today?
One of the learning on the job, one of the biggest things was managing the expectations of all stakeholders, especially in a leadership position. So you go in eyes wide open as best you can, and you do your due diligence. But especially, and not exclusively, but in international education, you tend to have a pair of stakeholders at the first. You've got your finances, and you've got your school kind of guidance and governing board and that type of thing. And then you've got your parents, which you need to manage expectations there very well. And obviously you've got your students. But I think for me that managing those stakeholders, or dare I say, creating lines of transparency between them all, because the vision of a financier may be slightly different to the vision of a schools group who want to get the curriculum and the policies and the strategies in place, which is different to the parent who's investing in you in time, not talking about finances, time with their kid because they want a certain output at the end of it, be it an Ivy League university or they want to go and work in the family business. But sometimes there's not a lot of transparency in all those stakeholders. So from a leadership perspective, actually you become the agent for that. You pull a lot of those things together. And that's something I learned very much on the job, because at first I didn't get that. I thought everyone was everyone was talking to each other. It's not always the case. So that communication, transparency is massively important, I think.
Yeah, and that, I think, no matter what time frame you are in education, that's always a challenge, isn't it? In terms of transparency between stakeholders, parents, students, teachers. There's a lot and a complex list that goes in with that as well, I imagine.
Yeah. Sorry, Alan, I was just going to say, but the teachers are massively important, teachers, because I think sometimes they get cut out of the equation. You know, a decision is made at a leadership meeting or something, and suddenly it's delivered to the teachers, and they think, well, where did that come from? What was our involvement in that? And of course, there are certain things where you have to make a decision. That's why you're accountable as a leader, someone in a position of responsibility to make a decision based on X, Y, and Z. But you need to get, I think you need to make sure that you've engaged first of all. No one's going to give you 100% buy-in. No one's going to agree to your vision or what have you. But as long as they're in the picture, they can also say, okay, well, that's where we're going. You know, none of us, you never get 100% kind of agreement on something. It's humankind. But as long as they know the vision and know what you want to try and do, at least you've informed. And I think that's something you need to get right in schools. I think it's vitally important that everyone doesn't have agreement, but they have understanding on where you're going. That's important.
Yeah, definitely. First-hand experience of that, but yeah, completely agree. Well, we spent a bit of time there just sort of reflecting on the career and obviously experiences from that. I'm really interested now to get your perspective, having had this moment of time, as it were, to reflect. Is there anything that you've observed about the education system during your time away that you hadn't noticed before?
Yeah, two things really. The first thing was the whole idea of inclusion. The school that I came to in Saudi was the first school. I'm a secondary educator predominantly, Alex. So although I worked in schools that have had nurseries and kindergartens and primary schools as part of their structure, I've taught some primary, but just as a design teacher, not as So having responsibility for the whole thing and the whole inclusive nature of a school was what's the word I'm looking for? Was a completely different perspective for me, because I was coming in at a stage where we were starting a school with primarily youngsters up to kind of upper primary, lower secondary, and being an inclusive school meant that you had children. The whole philosophy that Chatsworth put into this, and I think, it's still pioneering. We're the first school in Saudi to do this, and I believe we probably still are. The school still is that if a child had Down syndrome or an element of autism or ADHD or was gifted and talented, they're all in the same class. There are pullouts sometimes, but they're all the default is just the same class. So all children, whether neurodivergent or neurotypical, are in the same class. Now, you have learning assistants to come in with that. But my point about it was that was a completely new perspective for me, because most schools, if you have a child who needs some specific support, they tend to be pulled out and taught in isolation to the mainstay of what's going on. And I'm not saying that, but there's times when you need to do that. There needs to be one-on-one with with an adult, with a specialist. But the default here was that everyone was in the class together. And that for me was a mind-blowing experience. And I genuinely mean that. because it wasn't so much the neurodivergent kids which got the benefit out of it. The neurotypical kids tucked in and supported the neurodivergent kids. And there was suddenly, it was almost like when you cut yourself and everything rushes to where the wound is. Everyone just rushed in together in support. And that was a real eye-opener. It happened at break time. You saw kids, a child who was unable to do up the shoes, another child would come over and do up the shoes for them, take their hand and take them up the slide. Those types of things. It's just, that was a perspective that I had not seen in my career to date. You hear about it, you read about it, but the practicalities of it being in place, it brings with it an absolute nightmare of human resource management. And you can get to a point, if you're not careful, you've got too many adults in the class and with kids, because you've got learning support assistants, you've got specialists, and you've got the teacher who's tearing his or her hair out. Then you've got to manage that well in terms of class size, and that takes a deliberate focus on quality of learning for everybody involved. But it was a perspective for me that I'd not witnessed before, and I think it is brilliant. It was really good. I learned a lot.
Well, what about gaps or areas for improvement in education? Is there anything that's particularly become clearer to you, as well as then giving yourself that thinking time about how it can be addressed?
Yeah. Another thing that I learned, Alex, was I've been quite fortunate in a way, because being in design and technology, you tend to, when schools invested in digital technologies or things, CAD, CAM, going back, I remember having AutoCAD release 1, and I actually caught up with an ex-student of mine who happens to be living in France now, in my very first school. And he said he was so grateful for what we did at our school at the time, because he arrived at university, and the first year he'd covered everything at school, because we had the technology, AutoCAD release 1, he was working with CAD. This is 1986. The subject had led itself to me getting professional development quite early on robotics and automation, and even things such as the basic kind of word programs. I know we were Macs then, but whatever, just using digital technologies and support. Remember, this is a decade before the internet came into play. But the mindset to embrace technologies as tools to help you deliver what you wanted to do with the students, that was key. But what I'm seeing now, we've had the internet since 95, mobile phones in schools since 2005. We are seeing more and more with this. You've seen LinkedIn, you've ticked and smiled as I have, because I do poke the bear a little bit at times with this, but it's the problem we have in schools at the moment, and it's a good problem to have, is suddenly there's a massive, great pressure, I think, on teachers to adopt technologies, but not just AI, just everything going on. And we haven't given teachers enough opportunity or insight into how these tools can be beneficial to them. It's just been an onslaught. Not the school's fault. It's just that it's arrived very quickly. That's the nature of digital technologies. It's not going to go away. It's a tsunami of resource. But how do we genuinely educate our colleagues and leaders in schools to look at this in something which is a positive that supports learning for the benefit of all the kids in our care, as opposed to something which could be, where we just look at and rightly so, the well-being, the safeguarding, the security and everything else. The devices aren't responsible for that. It's our education on how students engage with it. I believe. I'm not saying it's just what I'm thinking. So for me, from the outside, I think that there is now a bigger disconnect. Bizarrely, we would think it would be smoother. There's a bigger disconnect, I think, with technologies coming into schools and how schools embrace them, because educators are sometimes the worst to deal with this, because we tend to go for the negatives all the time. So if you've marked a piece of work and you've given a kid 7 out of 10, as an example, I'm not saying this, 7 out of 10, rather than going, well done, you got 7 right. We say, well done, you got 7 right. Okay, you got 30% of that not right. Let's focus on that and see where you've missed out and try to do it. Someone in a school uniform walking down a corridor, the button's undone. The rest of them are fantastic. We go for the button undone. We don't go for the rest. You look really good. That's fantastic. Don't forget the button. Off you go. And that's the mindset with the technology I think we have in schools at the moment. And we need to take a breather. Teachers are burdened with an awful lot of things at the moment. And leaders are slightly, I hope I'm not unfair in saying this, leaders are slightly separated from that a little bit, because there is so much that teachers having to deal with, from the classroom management and behaviour of kids in school, the syllabus they're delivering, the assessments and the whole thing. adding technology into the loop is supposed to make their life easier. And as you and I and everyone else on this planet knows, emails were supposed to make our life easier. Emails completely complicate and and cause us more anxiety and hassle than anything else. And that's not the point of technology, digital technologies. So seeing that from afar now and being not burdened with that, having pulled away for almost a year from education, has given me insight into how we need to relook at how we embrace and use technologies as tools, digital technologies in schools, to support teachers and staff rather than burdening them with the issue. That was a ramble. Sorry, Alex, but yeah, you get the idea.
No, it's a thorough answer, and lots to unpack from it, because it begs the question then, I'm curious, if you obviously were to return to leadership next year, what would you do differently then based on those reflections?
I think the first thing is understand more the pressures that teachers are under, because schools are about people, and forget about technology or anything else. Schools are about people. So understanding the workload that teachers are dealing with so that you can help them to manage it in a way that they get the most productive, because the most inspiring and brilliant teachers can quickly go under. And the same as with leaders. You can quickly fold and buckle when you've just suddenly got a shower on your head, and people deal with things in different ways. And again, it's something you learn as you become, head of department, or if that's your route, head of department, your middle leadership, senior leadership, what have you. One email from a parent can completely destroy your day, because suddenly you think, and so everything else is, on the back burner. The pastoral side, you're head of sixth form now, as a house master, as they were called at the time, house parent. If I got a parent overseas in the country saying, my son was kept awake last night by so-and-so, and you think, okay, that then becomes your focus. And you have to keep things level. That's the best way. And the analogy I'd use, Alex, I think it's a bit like a road crash. I love motorsports, but just go with me here. If you have a road crash, the people that are silent are the ones that need your help instantaneously. The ones that are screaming and kind of making a lot of noise, okay, they're breathing, they're there, they're in the game. These are the ones I've got to go to. School's the same situation, I find. Those colleagues which are very quiet and kind of aren't on your radar at meetings. I just, on LinkedIn, I was just talking about the roles of how Chanel, the company, any new executives they bring to the school, they're not allowed to talk in meetings for 90 days. Their job is to sit and listen, not allowed to talk, which is quite a nice idea, because you've already got them on board because they're able at what they can do. You just want them to listen and learn about your culture and your thing. And it's the same with schools. Those that are quiet are quite often the ones that are often afraid to speak up and ask for help or what have you. They're going under. The ones that are always, banging at your door or sending the emails or barking, they're the ones that, okay, they're in the picture, I've got this, and every so often you need to go. You don't ignore them. But the ones that are silent and quiet, they're the ones that that's the one down the corridor, the knock on the door, how are you doing? How's it going? That's different, I think, or important.
Yeah, I think the general shift that I've noticed in my 20 years has definitely been, these last 5 has been more towards teacher wellbeing. And although it's always been there, but the openness to talk about it and be more mindful of it. It doesn't always mean that it gets practiced. I mean, the challenge is in the job that we do, there are periods of time where it's quiet and there are periods of time where it's chaos. End of term, for example, you're marking, you've got data inputs, you've got grades, all these different things that come, and they all seem to come at once. And once it's done, you get that kind of quiet period again, a break. But, as I say, it's finding the balance is the biggest challenge, I think, for any leader moving forward within a school.
It is, Alex, and it's you made again another good example there. One of the things I took a decision on, and it ruffled some feathers, but it worked. Was I gave staff a half day off that week as assessments were due, and so what we did was either choice of parents could pick up their kids, or we provided after school care because they were in work. So we did it, but teachers didn't have to teach. They could crack on and use those 3.5 hours for their reports and everything. Give them time to do the job you're asking. Because what we tend to do, and all schools do it, you get to report time, you're still teaching, you're still doing the stuff that you're supposed to do, and you've got this administration stuff that you've got to crack on with. And as you said, it becomes chaotic in sometimes a really good way, sometimes in a really terrible way. But if we're asking for significant extra demands at key points in time, try to give opportunity within that to give time to do the job. Email amnesties. I saw that at a school in France that I had. We had an email amnesty on a Wednesday, no emails. You had face mail, I call it. So you went and talked with people. Made a massive difference. And this is back in the early noughties. You go and talk with people. If I've got a problem with Alex, I'll come and say, Alex, can we have a talk? Because we misunderstood. Let's sit down and have a coffee and sort it out, and you can sort the things out. But emails with your keyboard warriors, you know what it's like. We've all been there. Everyone says, write the email, put it into Word, take a chill pill, and then send it the next day once you've reviewed. But most people, parents are great at that. Boomf. That's not what you meant to say. And that's, I think, we need to get, because we all get tetchy and befuddled at certain times of year, because we all have pressures. And as a leader, I think it's also more important sometimes is don't hide your emotions. It's important to keep your emotions open. But as leaders, there are pressure points in your days, your weeks, your times of term, as much as teachers have them too. So I think it's important just to be honest and say, look, guys, you're not going to see me today. I know I've got an open door policy, but I'm shut today because I've got to get this done. And everyone knows, okay, we know where you are. Yeah. Sorry.
I think that's a good one. I think that idea of going back to the idea of transparency, isn't it? And the vision that we talked about, if you have that open line of communication between everyone, it makes it a whole lot easier. But it's interesting you mentioned, obviously, we've talked about technology a little bit, emails being one of them. And obviously throughout your career, you've been an advocate for innovation and technology and shifting focus really into the future now. Obviously, AI is one big thing we know we can address. But in terms of technology and in terms of the future of education, where do you see this transforming teaching and learning in the next 10 years?
That's a strong question, Alex. I mean, the transformative impact of digital technologies is, it's just, where we come from. Funnily enough, I think education on the whole, there are other sectors of business, I think, that have been like this as well. But education on the whole have been relatively slow to the game to pick up, I think. And it's not always financial, because a lot of digital technologies are not necessarily expensive to bring into a school, because you've already got the infrastructure and things in place. Most schools have. So laptops have been in schools since 1986, Melbourne Girls Grammar in Australia, I think. So managing digital technologies or mobile technologies in schools has been something that's been around for a long, long time. But schools are still difficult are slow to the challenge. Basics, classroom management, for example. I think we come on to that later on, but I'm just thinking here in terms of education and what we look at. Teachers still sit at the classroom a lot of the time with and with their kids facing with the laptops open. And you wonder why the kids aren't engaging with you, when in fact your desk should be at the back. You stand at the back, you're behind the students, so you can see the laptop screens. They don't know where you are. It's a bit like invigilation in an exam hall. You stand behind the children, at the front. And it's just the little simple things like that which will make your life so much easier as a teacher. If you want to go to the front and talk to them, you can do. You've got the controls and the remote to do your presentation or turn the board on or off. But the way in which you engage and manage your class is important. In the same way as the way in which you manage, mobile phones, everything else. And we won't go down that rabbit hole. But I think over the next 10 years, next 2 years, forget 10 years. 10 years, we'll be into holographic teachers and everything else. I'm absolutely sure of that. Yeah. But the next 2 years is going to be more about managing the existing digital technologies we have in place so that schools can use them efficiently and not spend all their time running around trying to police the use of these things rather than embracing them and using them in support of what we do. School uniform policy is a classic. I've been in schools which have school uniforms, I've been in schools that have had no school uniforms. No school uniform is quite easy. It's a dress code. No slash jeans, no slogan T-shirts for your boots. First week of term is a fashion show. Thereafter, it all calms down. You're happy to get up and come into school. A school uniform, if you say you've got to have black shoes and then all the teachers are running around trying to catch the kids who've got brown shoes on, for example, that's a waste of teacher time. It's not something that you should be involved with. So your policy and your code on how that should be needs to be very clear and robust, so you're not wasting teachers' time having to go around on the details. I saw something on LinkedIn as well. I use LinkedIn a lot, by the way, as you're probably aware, Alex, but there was someone saying about, we want the kids outside engaging in the fresh air. We all do. It's not a device issue. It's a school policy issue. At break and lunchtimes, guys, there are no devices at all. You're all outside. Everyone knows, teachers know, off you go. But unless you have a clarity of that and you have buy-in from all your team, you told all your team, this is the thing. It's easy to say, get off that. You're outside now. Come on, the bell's gone. Off you go. Leave it there. Let's go. Yeah. If you're all on the same playing field, it's not an issue. It's actually quite simple to do. But you've got to do it.
I had that this year. Obviously, going in, you mentioned earlier about head of sixth form. And we have a very unique common room that the year 12s use and year 11s can use as well, just because they're a small cohort with a brand new school. Yeah. And believe it or not, in my youth, when I was at university, I used to work as a doorman. So I was doing, I think at the moment I'd stopped playing rugby. I was doing a lot of mixed martial arts. And one of my friends around Loughborough and Nottingham and Leicester was like, you should come and do this. And not because I necessarily wanted to get into scraps. It was just easy money. And as people told me, it's like, you've got quite a nice face. You're not going to intimidate too many of our guests. So I got to work in some very, very nice areas with that. But it's a very simple code that we've been brought in. No effort, no entry. And what I did is I put that as a poster up on my common room. And the kids were like, what? School uniform has absolutely no place, doesn't impact my learning. I went, no, you're right. You know what? It doesn't. What you wear does not impact your learning whatsoever. I said, this, though, is about culture and values. And made it very clear to the students and very clear to the parents is like, we're a community. We value the same things. Our culture is in terms of those things, our togetherness, and that we are and recognize ourselves as Arcadians. And very quickly, the kids realize, well, if I want to get into this place, if I want to go into this common room where there's a PlayStation 5 and a pool table and foosball and table tennis and a little everything you could possibly want, I need to make some effort. And it's like, well, that's a life lesson for you guys. Like, if you want to get in behind the curtain or anywhere, whatever you want to call it, it's like, you're going to have to put some effort in. This is not just for here. This is anything and everything you do in life requires effort. And if you can't get the small things right, if you can't wear shoes or tuck your shirt in, how are you going to get the big things right? And as soon as you're transparent and say it's not about learning, it's about culture and values, the shift completely changes. So I can completely get in terms of what you're coming from with there. And the same with technology, it's a policy thing. It's a transparency thing.
It is. And that's a brilliant example, Alex. And I'll back that up. If you don't walk into Reebok headquarters in California wearing Nike trainers, they'll grab you and take you to the shop, give you a pair of their product. But you'd be amazed how many people walk in with a Puma or Nike t-shirt on or vice versa. And it's exactly the same thing in the school. If you've got a school uniform or a dress code, it's easy to enforce. I don't like, but it's easy to get buy-in from all your student body, because they're all on the page, exactly as you just outlined there. Perfect example. But when if it's not watertight in terms of understanding from all stakeholders, that's when the fallout comes, and that's buy-in with your parents too, because the parents tend to be. If the kids are mine and not driving, they'll bring them to school so they can quickly check as well if you've got the right kit on, if you've got the right stash for your sport game, whatever it might be. That's a partnership that needs to happen.
Exactly, and parents need to know, because the amount of times you will have heard their kids say to them, "Oh no, black Nike Air Force Ones are absolutely fine," and the parents go, "Okay, if you say so." And it's like, well, because I've not communicated. I've not told you any different. They just believe what the child says. And then they turn around and you go, well, hang on a minute, those shoes. And it's like, well, little Jimmy came home and has said for the last 6 weeks that those are absolutely fine. It's like, right, that's on me because I've not directly, as a stakeholder, communicated my expectations with you and why. And that's the biggest thing for me, is always being able to go, why? If I'm asking you to do something, why? Yeah. And parents just want to know. And as soon as they know that, and it's like, okay, thanks. And I'm the same with my own kids now, as a parent of the school. It's like, well, tell me why. And it's, that's for me is golden. Now I know why. I can get behind that. It's clearly been justified to me. I feel like I've been informed about the decision, or I'm part of the decision. So yeah, it's a simple thing, isn't it? But has a massive impact.
It is, and it's easy to forget. You can call it a directive, I suppose. It's not a necessarily a rule or a regulation or anything. It's just a directive that is clear and understood by everybody in your community. And once you've got that, as you said, up on the wall, for want of a term, so everyone can see it and say, okay, that's what it is. It's like we were saying at the beginning of this chat. It's like everyone may not like a school uniform. Everyone may not like royal blue and light blue as a color combination or whatever it might be. That's what it is. That's why you're here. And as you said, the privilege of you being here and getting access to certain things which will, going forward, it's about etiquette, manners, and as you said, being part of the culture that you're in, and that's where we are. Don't expect otherwise. I worked in Switzerland when I've had colleagues, arrive, new colleagues, saying it's too cold, and we're up in the Alps at 1,800 meters. And at the same time, you've arrived in Saudi and they're a bit disappointed there isn't a bar available. So there's only so much you can, however much information you try to get across, there is still a level of, common sense, which you need to bring into that as well. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I mean, focusing on common sense, really this, teachers being able to be professional and give thought to things. It's like, I want to get your opinion on hybrid learning, because obviously it's something that came out of COVID and distance learning, home learning, whichever we want to call it. But teachers were introduced, maybe they'd not heard of it previously, and it's something that's been around for a long time, hybrid learning. But do you think now, 5 years on, and talking about maybe into 2025 in the next 18 months, do you think then the role of technology with pedagogy, this combination of hybrid learning, as it were, do you think it's created new challenges for schools and students, or do you think it's been effective?
I think it's new challenges, Alex, if I'm honest. I mean, if you look at, and I absolutely support and give admiration to schools and school leadership who make a decision to ban mobile technologies in their schools for all the reasons that they've identified through their own culture and what's going on in the school. But by doing that, fine. But by doing that, you are going to limit the hybrid learning aspect, because it can't just be phones. It's got to be tablets and the laptops and other things, unless you have a very robust setup there. My point is, we need these devices to facilitate hybrid learning. Hybrid learning can be done on a smartwatch as much as can be on a desktop PC nowadays. I think, and the idea of hybrid learning can help education vastly, especially on the teacher wellbeing side of it. You could actually teach from home if you're having a bad day, or you just need 2 days out because of kids or whatever it might be. You can still deliver what you're doing to a class. There still needs to be a human resource at the class end. That's the thing here, isn't it? Unless they're at home themselves, the children, like COVID, you still need classes. But I've seen good practice where a large campus site school would, in an evening, for example, on a pastoral boarding school, would deliver a PSHE course from one classroom to 8 or 9 boarding houses, streamed. That's hybrid learning within the campus. And I've seen it when you've had a loss of teacher in say a science department, where they put 2 or 3 groups together, and you've got hybrid learning from the class that's being delivered to another class, again within the same school, same block, but they're getting the education, but it's online like we're doing now. So there's that side of it. I think it's managing the expectation of what hybrid education is about, and managing, it's a difficult one, because in Switzerland we shot ourselves in the foot during COVID, because we continued our curriculum delivery to all students across all year groups online like this, but as it was per timetable. So you had 40 minutes, I guess everything. That was, with hindsight, we wouldn't have done that, but we did at the time. That's what we did, because we felt that was what the parents were expecting of us, because of the fee provision that, what we get, we're still delivering. So we did that. That was a classic case of us getting hybrid education wrong. We could have done it in a different way, which would have alleviated the pressures that teachers had to go through, because it just became those that were tech savvy, those that weren't tech savvy, those, the whole idea, it was just, there's no doubt that digital technologies in education are not going away. It's a tsunami of resource and capability. How schools embrace it, again, it comes back down to that policy. There will be schools, and I fundamentally support this, that say we're not going to have this. But I think it's a delay rather than, I don't think you're going to prevent something happening. And as I said, I've been quite fortunate. I was in it was the Northern Hemisphere's first laptop school in 1999. Every kid aged 4 to 18 had a laptop. We got that wrong because it wasn't because of the digital and the hypertext curriculum and all of that. It's just that the 4-year-olds couldn't carry a 4.5-ton Toshiba satellite computer in their backpacks. So we had to review that. But my point about it is this stuff's been around for a long time. Some schools have been very advanced. Some schools have been slow to the party. But I think those schools have been slow to the party have been quite clever in a way, although they may not know it, because they missed out the spikes and troughs, the investments and everything else that have gone on. And so they've leapfrogged and come into the stage now where a lot of this technology is coming into play, like AI, for example, and how we do it. And can I talk a bit about AI very quickly, Alex, or not? Are you cool with that?
Please. Yeah, please do.
The ironic thing for me on AI is that the only way we're going to get it right with children in our care, I've been thinking a lot about this, is by bringing back the human element into how we assess things. So we need to stop the idea of chasing down every written document in a plagiarism software or Turnitin.com or whatever, because every single document is now more or less, unless it's a handwritten thing in front of you on a piece of paper, it's going to have some kind of adjustment through artificial intelligence, just because of the way the kids have sourced and what have you. So you're on a hiding to nothing if you continue to try and catch people out on that. Yeah, it isn't going to happen. They submit a paper, it reads very well, whether it's totally their work or not. The next thing for me, I think, and this is where I think the change will come, is that, right, now we're going to sit down with this student for 15 minutes, and we're just going to ask some pertinent questions. We've got their document here. They haven't got their document with them there. We'll ask some questions about this and see what it is they've actually learned, what knowledge have they got and what they've learned, and what are their reflections on what they've written. Because if they have done it themselves, they will be able to respond to you. And if they haven't, then that flags up the fact that this isn't your work. You don't understand what you've written about. So therefore, we need to go to the next stage, which is X, Y, or Z. By doing that in an ideal world, logistically, you've got a cohort of 200 kids sitting first year of an IGCSE course or MYP or whatever, and you want to do that as, across 10 subjects. It's not going to happen. But we're at that stage, I think, where now we have to bring human intervention back into this to assess if the students are actually doing it, because we know our students in our care. When you teach a class of kids, you know if that's their work or not. You've got that gut reaction. You can see the way they write, the way they structure, the way they present, or in design, the way they've sketched, the way they've done that CAD drawing, the way they've presented their, you know where they've come from. You see that's not your work. Clearly not your work. I was in a school, I won't say where it was, where we had a Pantechnicon turn up to the school, and this beautiful 3-piece suite thing came out the back. And from China, other countries are available, came out the back from China, and apparently this 15-year-old kid had manufactured this all on his own in his dad's workshop at home, and it was better than anything you'd buy in Selfridges. And so, the disconnect there was quite clear. It's the same with paperwork and AI. And so how we assess it is the way going forward. That's the big question now. It's not about AI. AI's here. Stop worrying about it now. Stop. We've got to look at the bigger picture of how we're going to assess. And I don't mean give a grade as such, but is this the kids' work, and do they understand what they've done? If they understand what they've done, they can apply it to the next stage in their game, and that's where we need to be.
It sounds very much what you mentioned there, and heard the discussions about this is what we call in the IB system is the viva voce, in terms of, and I come across it, and it won't be long, and you'll see this more frequently, but it won't be any different to let's say a language. You do your speaking assessment in languages, but someone where, and I can't remember the name of it, but there were 2 kids from Stanford that had put it out. but you can basically input a text document, and instead of writing answers now, this will ask you questions which you verbally answer. And it's, as with multimodal AI, the ability to understand like oracy now, super, super good. And so, someone out there will be developing platforms that are going to allow you to go, right, put your assessment in. And it doesn't matter if it's a written assessment, a video assessment, an audio, whatever it may be. And it's just going to ask you some randomized questions about it and check your understanding. And I'll be able to take that information to see whether you truly do understand it. Because I think now, moving through this, it's not about how the information gets there. It's do you understand the information? How can I get you to apply the information? And this is where around the world now we're seeing lots more project-based learning. We're seeing lots more inquiry-based learning. This is why we're getting more design thinking coming into things, because it's then the interdisciplinary component. So, well, if you understand it, apply it to this or embed it with this. And I think shifting and moving that focus, like you say, about what you can do with the learning is going to be really, really key over these next couple of years.
The software you mentioned is really cool because metacognition is absolutely crucial in this. That aspect of do the students understand what it is that they've engaged with and done and so on and so forth. And that's the way forward. So, and coming back to the beginning of what you asked about moving forward over the next period of time, I think that is absolutely where we're going with this, because off the back of that as well, I suppose, Alex, is what do we provide in terms of the syllabus and curriculum that we do, and I know that's a bigger picture in Game Changer, but how do we deliver curriculum and the content that we do? And is the content that we're delivering currently right, looking ahead? We've all seen the things that people say, oh yes, kids are going into, preparing for jobs that that we don't know exist yet. Well, yeah, we've been saying that now for an awful long time. We just need to prepare kids with the best knowledge base they can so they can turn their hands to whatever it might be, whether it's in the science field, a creative and performing arts field, or sports field. You just got to give them the most appropriate and best tools that you can to allow them to crack on and go to the next stage. But how we do that, as you quite correctly said, is the next stage in the game, I think. We're shifting from content through to evaluating if they've understood and learned the content. That's that's a bias, because at the moment it's kind of 70-30. I think that's going to change.
Yeah, and it is one of those, it's a wicked problem, as I keep being told, in terms of it doesn't have just a linear answer to it. It's something that's going to take time, effort, and lots of people coming together to try and do it. And that kind of cements one of the things that we were kind of talking about then. You transitioned really nicely through it, that technology is important, but humanization, the human side of education is super important, probably more so now than what it really has been, just because of the influx of technology and the availability of technology. But within that, schools find themselves in a very tricky place, don't they? Because we are, on the contrary to what we've just said we would like to happen, still kind of at the hands of academic outcomes. And so the challenge, and I'm curious from your side, is how can schools go about maintaining the balance between achievement and the holistic development of students?
I suppose it depends a little bit on the benchmarks, Alex, isn't it? We had in Saudi a no homework policy, which was an interesting one. It was an interesting one for me. I'd not experienced it before, and that was it was a group idea. But it very quickly sunk in, because it was the buzz of the town for a couple of weeks. Kids were thinking, "Oh, we've got our homework. This is a holiday camp." And then parents would be on my doorstep saying, well, they'd already signed up to this. They knew about it in advance, but what is this now homework? And then quite quickly you realise that the teachers that inspired the children in their care, especially across the whole of primary, because secondary was new, were taking work home. They were doing their maths at home. They were doing it at home because they wanted to, not because they'd been told to. And the nature of what they did was because of what they'd been doing in class. It wasn't kind of go home, learn those 10 verbs and we'll have a test on Monday. There was no testing on that type of thing. But the assessment of what they'd learned in the next part of the stage of the work with the teacher was where you could then quite quickly see if they'd understood or not, because they needed that to be able to progress to the next part of the process. And the no homework thing was really good, because it took off pressure from teachers to mark the stuff and from students to have to kind of go home. But it actually freed up then time for genuine learning. And that was an interesting nuance for me. But achievement and what was the other thing you said then, Alex? The difference between achievement and
the holistic development of students.
Holistic development of students. I think taking that example, giving ownership to students at a young age. I mean, it's for them to lead on their education. And I'm not talking about taking away the teachers. And I know it can be a term which is bandied around a lot, but to take ownership for what they're learning because they're inspired, I think that is absolutely vital education. There is too much out there which takes away the focus for students. And, from mobile phones and technologies, not mobile phones, forgive me, applications and software, to other things. There's a lot of kind of sweet shop mentality going on at the moment. The fundamentals of what we need to do, your language, communication skills, understanding culture. It's why in many ways, certain things like STEM education, as much as I applaud it, I find it frustrating because it's divorced a lot of the key things we need for basic kind of anthropological development with kids, humankind, languages, culture, history, geography, what happened before in design, what didn't work and what's worked. We have to look back in time to go forward. Communication, talking, sketching, the most used language in the world is a sketch with annotation. Irrespective of your culture, you understand it. But we kind of ignored that for the sake of that. And we've gone too far, like the technology stuff. I think we've had too much of a focus and an input on that. Not that stuff isn't good. Please don't misunderstand me. But we need to not necessarily rein that one in, but give credence to the others and bring them up as well. Your ability to have a couple of languages in this day and age is massive. And I'm not just talking about coding. I'm talking about, spoken, written languages. That's massively important. Culture. Geography and history are absolutely fundamental for kids understanding different cultures and where they come from and the ways of the world. I know that it's massively important. In design, it's important. There's certain colours you can't use on products in Japan, which you can use in the UK because they're unlucky or what have you. Those fundamentals on that side of things, as much as understanding that most of the problems in the world come to the fore because we don't understand each other. You don't have to agree. It's just about getting understanding on, okay, that's a different way of looking at it. That's cool. Rather than, is in my way. And that's a soft skill issue, but STEM doesn't really cover that. And again, I'm not being disingenuous to STEM at all. I think it has a massive value in curriculums in terms of what it does, but we need to look at the other stuff too. And I think the whole review, coming back down to basics here, I don't agree with this core subject ideal. And I know that science, maths, whatever, I don't believe they are more important than other subjects. And most curriculums give them far more time in schedules than others. I think that's not right. I think we should have parity. They are, of course, they're important, and no one's saying they're not. But there are other subjects. I think you've got parity. Health and sport. I mean, come on. Especially in this day and age, to give kids that side of thing. Performing arts, confidence to stand and present, to put your ideas across. That's not going away. That's becoming even more important now, especially post-school at interview level. The university is looking at qualifications. No, they want to sit down with you face-to-face and talk and find out what you're like as a human being. That's where we need to have a focus.
It's got me thinking that really now. Like, who decided that science, English and maths, because it's in Dubai, obviously the UAE, the class is now Arabic Islamicas, as you probably know as well. But who decided that from a UK education system that science, English, maths should be core subjects?
You're opening a sluice gate there, Ali. See, I mean, it goes back to the national curriculum back in the mid 80s, I think, 44. But going right back, if you go back to Hansard, 1860, in Parliament they coined the 3 R's. It was reading, writing. I'll get this right, David. Reading, writing, and wroughting, as into wrought a beautiful design. They were the 3 main rubrics. Someone will correct me if they watch this. Rubrics for education at the time. I don't know the evolution of subject. Maths and science have always been bastions of kind of academic prowess, haven't they? In a way, dare I say, at the expense of creativity. But I know lots like yourself, Alex. There are lots of very creative mathematicians and scientists out there, who still do wonderful things in terms of teaching their subject through a creative way, so kids are engaged. And it's more than just putting those 2 parts together to see a beautiful big eruption in your chemistry lab, or rather than using a ticker tape timer. Yes, I know they've gone times up, but I remember a colleague tying a loo roll to the back of his Honda Accord and disappearing down a long road, and the kids had to then stump it at different points to work out the trajectory. The wonderful things that go on, it's just, but how there is rigor and need in history, geography, languages, business, art, design, sports science, as much as there is, and all the other subjects, as much as there is in maths and science. And I don't know where that imbalance came from. As I said, every subject for me has importance. The difference, like the IB with HLs, like A levels, where you can study more, you further your understanding and learning by taking the subjects that you like or are good at to the next degree. My dad was always very good at me because I was terrible at maths. My dad was always along the lines of do the subjects you enjoy rather than the ones that might get you a career. All right, I fell into teaching. Don't go there. He was just never work with kids, but that's the way it goes. No, but so I did the subjects at A level that I enjoyed, which then perpetuated my thing through. So many kids, especially with parental pressure, get pushed to do. You've got to do maths, chemistry, and X, Y, or Z because you need to be a doctor because your dad's a doctor. Or you need to, and sometimes that may not be the right way. But that parity of subjects, what I'm talking about. Sorry, I'm going off. But the parity of subjects is massively important. And as you said, culture dictates it. I mean, in Saudi, the culture is very much of the kind of my son's in the school because he's going to go Oxford or Ivy League. It's as blatant as that, at the top end. That's the outcome of why I'm investing in this education. Not everyone, but a lot of parents have that. As much as a lot of parents say, I actually don't care about the qualifications. I want my child to be happy, engaged, come home smiling and tired, up in the morning, going to school smiling, not yet tired. And that's what I want from this. There's, they're looked after, they're safeguarding, their well-being is good, and that you've got and everything in between. As much as you've got parents who kind of put into some schools, they want them to be a champion chess player or a national rugby player or whatever it might be. Yeah. Everyone has their what they're looking at. But I think we need parity of curriculum. I don't like this core subjects and that type of thing. I don't think it's healthy, especially in this day and age. Next question.
No, you think you make a very good point, a strong point for the notion moving forward of interdisciplinary. And again, I've had some conversations with some people recently about that, and it's something I'm passionate about. I'm from a sports ground, from a sports perspective, and rugby. It's always should be skills before drills. I stand by that, and it's. I imagine we could talk about that for another hour or so and probably still be nowhere. But
just very briefly on that point, not the rugby. We won't talk about the rugby, but the other point. I think we're on the tipping point now, the cusp of where does the blended curriculum, the stuff you do, whether you call it extracurricular, whatever, the blended curriculum overtakes the core curriculum. There's a balance, there's an imbalance. There's a lot of discussion at the moment about the core curriculum, kind of the blended curriculum and everything on top starting to take precedence in education. And I'm wondering if we're at a tipping point where actually we do have to relook. Yeah. We look at things in that way.
I call that, in biology, we call that the kind of like the epigenetics. So you got your DNA and the reality of it's what
in the afternoon for me, Alex. Don't use big words with me now. I'll be lost.
That's how it resonates for me. It's the epigenetics. What sits in between the DNA? What sits on top of the DNA? Like that drives it, as it were. There we go. We'll start to wrap this up though, and I'm going to give you this quick fire round called Getting to Know David.
Right.
And hopefully you got your notes there. I can hear the paper rustling. So I'm glad to see that.
I don't know what I did, but go on, go.
You got your prep work. Right. A book or a resource in education that has inspired you recently?
Very recently, I've been reading a lot of books. I said them a time out. Not the most recent one, about 2 books ago, I got it off Amazon, was John Cleese, Creativity, a short guide to it. And he comes at it from a number of angles. And the reason why I recommend that is because if you look at that from a school's perspective, a leader of a school's perspective, or even a teacher in schools, intellect and being clever doesn't mean that you are precluded from being creative in what you do. And there's the way he comes at it is there is creativity is something that everyone has within them. Because you have a certain focus or something doesn't preclude you from being somewhere else. And I think that is massively important. In the same way as intellect doesn't necessarily mean that you've got common sense. And it's a three-way that I had a conversation with Richard Andrew, Barry Cooper recently about this, about common sense in schools. So that's it. John Cleese, Creativity, A Short Guide to Creativity.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's the book.
Next one. If you could design your dream school with no limitations, what would be its key features?
The key features would be as such. I would start off with one large circular hub with circles of hubs, smaller hubs around, because I think project-based education is absolutely the way. So you start off in the middle, you deliver the brief, and then you've got your maths, your science, your language, everything in the hubs, and the brief works. The kids are in groups. They then go off to these hubs where you've got a teacher there all the time, and they can go off and say, well, we need to understand maths to deal with this bit of the problem. They go there. They want to design. We need to manufacture a case, whatever it is. But the project starts, then you go off. So I'd have large spheres with circulars, no squares. I don't like squares. The corners and the flat walls, you can put those within by putting surfaces. But I think it creates an ambience. I'd also have a geodesic dome on top of everything, but another story. But sound and amplification. But I think we need to look at the way we are stuck in the heritage of school design, because all schools have been built with square rooms, and the bell goes and they move and you chunter on to the next 40-minute session or whatever you're doing. We need to relook at how education doesn't run on the bell. Learning doesn't run on the bell. Some kids have got it in 10 minutes. Some kids need 2 hours, but you need to give them that ease. But I know it's an easy thing to say, Alex, and it's all, hey, wow, that's great, man. But for me, I think it can be done. And I think there are schools that have done this, or education systems that have looked at this. But it's a costly thing. But I think it's also a mindset. We need to look at the way in which we chaperone and herd kids around between areas. Yeah, there you go.
No, it's all good. The question was a dream school, so it's a dream answer. And then lastly, a memorable lesson that you've learned during your career break that educators could benefit from.
Yeah, this is one I remember talking about. I think one of the mistakes that I made many, many mistakes, Alex, not just, in recently, but throughout my career. When you get into middle senior leadership, I got my first head of department in 94. And I came in with this, I was blue-eyed, bushy-tailed, and I had all these great ideas. And my very much senior team of colleagues with me, I left them behind because I ran and I forgot that, what I had and my thing was not on their radar whatsoever. Leadership's the same. You can come in with a vision, and I've been on the end of it as someone working in the school where a new leader comes in, especially international schools where you get quite a fluidity of change, and so they come in with a new idea, and suddenly everyone's kind of hitting that right. We're going to hit school uniform, or we've got this, and then they move on, and then suddenly all that initiative and investment emotionally and everything else is then dropped, because the next one comes in. As a leader, don't run ahead. Make sure you've got your team on board. This is what I learned from taking a break and looking back on what we achieved. Inclusion and everything was very, very much we were all together on that. That was wonderful. But there are certain things where I think, especially digital technologies and mobile technology use in classrooms, I went forward because I had that experience, but I forget that not everyone's come from the same culture or experience of that. There are still colleagues who haven't used laptops in classrooms before. We have to remember that. The idea of having a digital device is quite new. For some, as you said, digital natives, and they've been, we're not going to have paper for too long in the future, I would suggest. Sustainability is going to be digital. We need to manage for that. But yeah, don't run ahead and leave your team behind. That's what I reflected upon. Make sure that they're on board, at least engage with your vision, even if they don't totally support it. At least they can see where you're going. And remember to turn around and go back and pick up the ones who just need more guidance and understanding on what you're trying to do.
3 great takeaways. Thank you ever so much for that. And I think that kind of encapsulates the conversation we've had. It's reflective, it's been inspiring, it's been thoughtful. What would be one takeaway that you hope the listeners, whether they are educators, leaders, or policymakers, will walk away with?
Be yourself, Alex. I think that's massively important. There are too many times in education where people try to walk the walk that someone else has done, or the way someone else behaves in the way they do the job. You do it the way. Of course, there are certain things that you need to put into place through policy and what have you. But don't try to be someone else in what you do. Whether you're a leader, you're a teacher, a head of department, a head of pastoral. Your personality and your trait is the reason why you've got yourself to that position. Thereafter, school rules, regs, policies, obviously, we're all, as we said earlier, the buy into that, so there's clarity. But don't try to change the person that you are. If you don't wear a suit, don't suddenly put a suit and tie on because you think that's the perception people need to do for you to do your job, because you won't feel the same person. And in the same time, be aware of that the way in which you are seen by people, other stakeholders, parents when they meet you, outside speakers and presentations when you give them, and you've got to look the part, for want to have gravitas, whatever you want to call it. But don't change the person that you are. And I think many people do try to change because they think they've seen somebody else and aspired to them. Be self. But keep that learning journey going. Keep true to yourself, but keep the learning journey, and just embellish what you are through what you see and what you learn. I think that's the key thing for me.
I think that's a great takeaway. Something definitely resonates with me as well. But drawing this out now, if people want to connect with you, kind of already mentioned LinkedIn. Where is that? Where's the LinkedIn address? Where can they find you?
LinkedIn. If you just look at Ardles, Ardles, that's my LinkedIn handle. Ardles, and I've also got a blog that I do, ardles.com, ardles.com. But LinkedIn's the best way. It's got my emails, phone numbers, that type of thing on there. I think, Alex, that's the best way to start. Or rewatch this episode with you, and they can hear that information again.
Amazing. We'll put it in the description and tag you in everything that we do, as we always do. So amazing. Well, David, just want to say massive thank you for taking the time, speaking us from France, all the way from France today, and just sharing that fascinating career story that you've had, and the time to be. I think in some ways you've got people out there that have, no matter how it came about, that are maybe slightly envious of the fact you've had that ability to pause and reflect. And I say refresh and gather ideas that are going to continue to impact education in the future in the best ways possible. So really, really appreciative of you just taking the time to share that with us today and offering some of those inspirational ideas and stories with us. I'm really, really grateful.
Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity. I said, if we're not in this game because we don't enjoy it or love it, then you need to try another game. So that's the bottom line, really. But thank you.